Okay, so before we embark ourselves on building this entire website in AngularJS, let's take a look at the built website that we left off with in the previous course, which is HTML, CSS, and JavaScript for web developers. The concentration of that course was HTML, CSS, and in particular responsive design using CSS, and basics of JavaScript and Ajax. And while we didn't build anything super duper fancy, but the website came out to be pretty good and the customer was happy as well. So what I did here is I copied the very latest version of the website from the previous course and I placed the contents of that folder directly into lecture 49, which is located in fullstack-course 5 examples folder. And I already have my browser sync started up inside the lecture 49 folder. So let's go to the browser and check out the website. So here's the website. It's fully responsive. If we squeeze the browser a little bit, you'll see that things get rearranged, icons get smaller, and the pictures get smaller. Some things just simply go away, and eventually we get to the mobile view where we have this, burger button, so to speak, that could be clicked, and you could see the whole menu. Go to the menu, and actually let's expand it. And now you could click on any particular menu you want. And you could see prices for a particular menu item, as well as the picture and the ID that the restaurant knows about that you could call with that particular ID. Say, I want 2 A1s, meaning 2 soups. Okay, so let's go back to the home page. As you can see, if you take a look at the URL, there isn't much routing going on. So if I click the back button, really, I'm not really going anywhere. The pound sign went away, but I'm still sitting inside of this soup menu category. So I have to click this button right here, or this link, and it will take me back to the home page. And basically the routing is obviously not here. So if I click in the menu, I'll go back to all the categories, click back on the logo, get back to the home page. And here's our home page, and here's another way to basically click on the menu. So let's take a look quickly at the HTML that gets served over here. Let's take a look at the view page source, not what the DOM things is going on, but the page source. And what we have here is, besides the head and the header, which is just a whole bunch of things for CSS and the look of it, so to speak. And right now we're trying to concentrate on functionality. If you take a look here, after the headers is done and we have this call button, that's the giant telephone button that shows up only in the mobile view, we have this placeholder, the div with the ID content-main. And after that, we have the footer. So everything you see, other than the footer and the header, is actually contained in this empty main-content. And the way we put content in here is using Ajax and then finding this particular element in our page and then inserting the content, obviously first querying the server to pull the data in, and that's basically how it happens. Now, don't get confused, by the way, by this fave icon that's showing AngularJS. That's just, I don't have a fave icon for this website, and that's just my browser caching the AngularJS fave icon from all the other localhost 3000 that I've been doing throughout the course. Okay, so let's go back to the code editor, and let's take a look at this code. And if we scroll down, you can see this is all just part of the head. This is index.html. And we finally get to this call button, and there's our div with the main content class container. But basically, the main content, that's where we're going to be inserting the content of the page. Basically, manually coding what our UI router was going to do for us with the UI-view tag. So what I want to do in this lecture is really concentrate on the functionality, not necessarily on the layout or the CSS, but on the functionality that we coded using a regular JavaScript. As you can see here on the left, we have ajaxutils.js, and that's a script we wrote ourselves, and there's a whole bunch of bootstrap, jQuery, npm.js, and script.js. So those two files, ajax-utils.js and script.js, are the files that we ourselves wrote in order to make this website functional. Let's take a look at Ajax Utils. And Ajax Utils really is mainly about this one method, which is send get request. That Ajax Utils, the rest of it is basically all to support this particular method. And I'm not going to go over the standard get request object functions where it gets this XML HTTP request. You can take a look at it yourself. But I do want to go over this send get request. It basically is a function that takes a request URL, that's what we're going to make the actual network call to, the response handler, which is the function who is going to handle the response once it comes back from the server, and a flag is JSON response. In other words, sometimes we're going to get some data and we might want to pre-process that data since we're assuming it's going to be JSON, pre-process it and turn it into a regular JavaScript object. But sometimes we're going to be requesting a template or a partial or basically a piece of HTML that's needed for our view, and we're also going to use an AJAX request for that as well. So for that, we're going to need to say that JSON response, I don't want you to pre-process that as JSON, just turn it in as false. And you can see here that we're calling getRequestObject, and we're setting its onReadyStateChange, and we're wrapping our handleResponse function inside of an anonymous function, making a closure here. And hopefully by now you really know what that is. And in the previous course, we did discuss what that is. And we're finally making that request and making sure to pass true because we do want this request to be asynchronous request. Now the handle response function, if you take a look at it, is something that basically just checks ready state 4, checks that status is 200, so there's no errors coming back from the server. And then it basically checks whether JSON response is JSON response flag that we passed in right here when we called handle response. Is JSON response flag there or not? If it's not there, we're going to assume that it's true because most of the cases we're going to be actually requesting data and not HTML templates. So we'll just assume it's true, and whoever is using this library, which is going to be us, can then simply call the function, this function, send get request without the last parameter, making the coding a little bit cleaner. Okay, so all we're doing here is making sure if it's not defined, we're going to set it to true. If it is in fact defined, we're going to create a regular JavaScript object using the JSON parse method, and we're going to pass that object directly into the function response handler. And the response handler function, if we scroll down or scroll up, is the response handler function that the user of this library provided to us. So they're passing in a function value. We're propagating that function value to our handle response function. And the handle response function finally executes or invokes that function with the return of the request. But first, if JSON is what comes back as the payload or the response to that request, we're going to turn that JSON into a regular JavaScript object first, and then pass it to the response handler function that the user of our AJAX utils passes in to us. Otherwise, if it's not JSON, we're just going to go ahead and pass in the straightforward text that got returned from the server to the handle or the response handler function that the user of AJAX utils passed into us. And obviously this line is what we're going to use when we retrieve template HTML for a particular view in our application. Okay, so let's stop here and we'll continue reviewing this website in part 2 of this lecture.